Welcome. We're going to be starting here. I think we have Greg Moody logging in. We'll see if Mindy makes it into the room as well. And we're going to get rolling here in a second. There you go, Master Moody. Good to see you.
Hey,
And
sir.
I see Mindy logged in and is not on stage to use Demio terminology. And we are good to go here. I have a little graphic that I just stumbled across that I thought might be a useful tool to describe what most people, frankly, as financial advisors, coaches, consultants, and in all businesses seem to do. Uh, Dr. Mr. Moody here, does this describe what we encounter a lot?
Yeah, this is really exactly what happens, and it's a misunderstanding of how business operates. Really, I mean, uh, you get you get somebody working really hard to get their business going, and then after it seems to work, they stop realizing what got their business going in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. And our promise of today's webinar, there's Mindy. You have new glasses, Mindy, or have I just
Yes.
not seen those?
Yep. You just haven't seen these.
Hey, those are good.
And
And apparently my new glasses for Stephen.
Yeah, we got.
My new glasses have stopped traffic.
Well, for everybody that's listening here, we've got a lot of stuff happening. We're trying to get everybody starting 2024 off really, really well. We're going to be covering quite a few things today as we wait for Stephen to get reconnected here. Here he goes. One of the big mistakes that advisors are making is that what this graph really represents is, in most cases, it's related to getting enough new clients. That they think that clients have to come in spurts, because they get enough referrals, they get enough, or they get a little burst of referrals, and then they've got some clients, or they get a burst of business because they did a webinar and they get some people coming in from a webinar. And so that's what happens with these peaks and valleys. Or they're struggling and then they freak out and go, well, I got to get some stuff happening, so I'll go talk to people, or I'll go call some people, or I'll go try to get some business happening. And it's really a poor way to do any kind of business. And yet it seems to be the common way that we end up seeing a lot of our clients and a lot of people before they start working with us do business. And that's what we really need to start with, is in anybody's I can't take the slide up because Stephen put it up, but in anybody's practice, we need to have enough things going on that you can be really at this peak all the time, that you have enough leads coming in and enough clients that you can work with, and even better, clients that you want to work with, clients that are going to be the right kind of people for you to work with. It doesn't mean that we're being judgmental about people, but if you really enjoy working with people pre-retirement, or you really enjoy working with people that are in the medical profession, you really enjoy working with people that are in the real estate profession, whatever is going to be your favorite group of people to work with, you have a good group of those clients and a consistent flow in, so that you can be picky enough, and this boom time consistently is happening. And hey, Stephen, good to have you back. I was talking about how to keep the boom time being the normal time, and then you can be consistently having a business that you're happy with, instead of a business that you're having financial stress and then freaking out at the bottom.
yeah, that's exactly right. And Mindy, can you, before we go any further, share the direct phone line to get to you directly, and the link for your calendar in the chat box there? I think that would be helpful for everybody who's on the webinar, whether you're live with us right now. If you are live with us, we very much appreciate it. Or if you're watching a replay of some sort, we invite you to give us a call. what we'll do is schedule a time first with Ms. Godfrey and then with Dr. Moody and then myself to give you an update on 5 or 6 missing opportunities that you may not see in your practice. It's always, even if you're doing a lot of things right, it's always good to have somebody who is well versed in this to look over your shoulder and give you some feedback. And again, there's no cost, no obligation. It is not a sales pitch. If you're interested in working with us, we'll discuss briefly what it is we do on a regular basis. But if you're interested in working with us, great. If you're not, that's fine too. But it is a chance to give you just a little bit of free objective advice on how your practice is looking. So there are the both a calendar link to schedule a time on Ms. Godfrey's calendar or the direct phone number to give her a call. But sorry about my internet connection. There's something about this time of day that my supposed to be the best internet connection you can get for a business line in the mountains of Evergreen, Colorado seems to fritz out about 2:00 on any given day for some reason. So I apologize for that. Anyway, so Ms. Smithy, it was a great description, but I thought this was a good way to start is, if there's one principle, no matter what business you're in, but anytime you're in a business where you have to make sales and bring new clients in, I have an MBA in my background, but the better thing to have is this was Jeff Smith coined ABM, always be marketing. You can never take your eye off of that ball. Is the mistake that people make is they get into a point where they have plenty of new clients, they're busy onboarding them, they're stuck tied up in administrative work, trying to get all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, and they take their eyes off the marketing, and then they go through a slow period because there's a ramp up period that it takes to get that really up and running, and so they go through a slow period, and then once they get things built up, they go through the same cycle again. You've got to always be marketing, and it's the way to move upscale, by the way, in your clientele is to have way too much opportunity and then be able to be picky rather than having 2 or 3 meetings a month and you feel like you've got to take everybody you talk to. You want to expand on that a little bit? It's having a next bus coming helps a lot in your perspective of things.
Well, yeah, and then it's a powerful feeling. You can, when you're talking to somebody, you don't have to think from a scarcity mentality. You think from an abundance mentality that the next person that you talk to, you can talk to from the point of view of that you want to help them rather than, geez, I hope that they'll start with me. I hope that they'll work with me. And part of that idea is coming up with why you're going to be the right kind of person for your niche and your market. We talked to so many advisors, hundreds, it seems like just in the past recent time frame, and they seem to have no idea why they're the advisor that their group should talk to. Well, I'm just good, or I'm just better. There's not really any unique reason that they're any different. And even when we look at their website or their profile, they have a profile that says a lot of platitudes and a lot of things that are great and good, but we could copy and paste one from another. It doesn't seem to be any different. And that's what needs to change. That's what needs to be different, so that everybody the people that we work with are going to stand out in a way that matters to the people that you're going to talk to. You should have high standards for what you look like. And I don't mean high standards because you have a nicer suit on. In fact, that might be counterproductive. But high standards in that your expectations would be that you have a lot of people that are looking for you, and then you're going to be able to pick and choose a little bit more.
Yeah. And if we were going to, the promise of the webinar was 5 things you can do to kick off 2024 with record results. And let's go through a short list. And as usual, we'll probably actually end up with 9 or 10 before we're done. But if I were to start, is most advisors we come across do not really have a solid sales system in place to onboard new clients. Now, they think they do, and they have an administrative process with here's the data we need, and here's the passwords we need, and here's the stuff that we need to uh, direct your money and so forth. But from a standpoint of somebody raises their hand, whether it's a referred lead, a opt-in from Facebook, a referral from their website, an opt-in from their website, or whether they do a live meeting. Most advisors really don't have a good systematic lead follow-up mechanism and follow-up mechanism. One of the organizations I talk a lot about, and financial advisors love to hate them, but it's Ken Fisher and the Fisher Investments. But what I'll say about them is they have great direct response marketing, and advisors that I talk to who tell me LinkedIn doesn't work, or Facebook doesn't work, or other social media doesn't work, or Google doesn't work, or TV doesn't work, or newspapers don't work. I hold up for them the full page ad in the Wall Street Journal, show them the TV spot that's on, at any given moment on the various news channels, show them, we've collected the Facebook ads and other ads that they've done. Of course it's working. They wouldn't be spending millions of dollars on it. What my criticism of that organization, as good as it was, and Greg, and Mindy, I don't know if I relayed this conversation to you. I was talking with Dan Kennedy last week, and I said, I use Ken Fisher as an example, use him in the book, but having played prospect, they're horrible at lead follow-up. They do a horrible job. And he said, oh, yeah, I actually talked to Ken about that. Because as you know, when I first saw him talking about his business was a small closed door, small group client meeting in Cleveland with Dan Kennedy. And he said, yeah, I talked to him about that. From his perspective, they are hitting them from so many different ways on their advertising that if they don't get them the first time, they'll get them the third time, they'll get them the fifth time. And he was as flabbergasted as I am that they don't have sequential autoresponder email, sequential autoresponder text message, direct mail pieces that immediately go out. Especially, they do a great job qualifying prospects because they take you through many different steps, finding out what your assets are, what your investable assets are, how old you are, how far you are from retirement, everything else. They could take 90% of their leads and dump them and spend a ton of money on the 10% that are highly qualified and really jump up their business. What I have found in their case with following up with, playing prospect with them is they just hand it off to the advisors, and then most of their advisors do a crappy job, as most big company advisors do a crappy job of following up on leads. But if we could start with number one, it's have a defined sales system, one that'll stand the stress test of doubling, tripling, quadrupling the lead flow, that will follow up with great efficacy every prospect that comes in. So if you get a lead on the website, a human being should be calling them immediately. We can talk about those stats, but it should be sequential autoresponder, email, text message, direct mail pieces should be going in the mail. An advisor group, they're pretty substantive, but their marketing person, I think we broke his mind in the first month because we were talking about all the things that should happen for leads. Well, in our case, it's all automated. So other than the human being does the outbound call, we'll farm out to a fulfillment house for the direct mail. We'll farm out to another company to do postcards. We'll farm out to somebody else to, ship popcorn and a personal note. We'll farm out somewhere else for the, once we set it up, it happens forever, email and so forth. But let's talk about that. I would start number one is have a really good sales process, a standard process of the first meeting through the onboarding, but a really solid prospect on each of the lead follow-up mechanisms to get good conversion. What would you add to that point, Greg?
Well, and I think for people listening, they may feel like what you said at the beginning of that they think they have a sales system, and you think we get a lot of people saying, "Oh no, everybody that I talk to, I get started with me, I get signed up with me, and they work with me," and that's a big mistake to think about, because the problem is if your marketing isn't really good, And the only people that come and talk to you are friends or referrals or people that you've drummed up from the golf course and ones that you have conversations with. Well, those are a different group of people. They already are pre-qualified to know you. They are high level clients at the beginning. What we want to do, if you can do your marketing well, is get people that are highly qualified, really good target prospects. Absolutely great, but now you have to educate them a little bit about you, and that means your sales system has to be very good. You have to communicate with them better. So what ends up happening is when we get a really great lead flow for the client, then that sales system that they don't have, because they've only been working with high level referrals, client referrals, or people that are randomly coming into their office once in a while, pretty much desperate to get started. They ready to throw money at them. Well, those guys are easy. They're laydowns, and when you get the other kind of a big lead flow coming in that we can help you with, then it breaks that process. So that's why this is really important to talk to understand what Steven's talking about. And from the point of the lead generation on, and I think for a lot of people listening too, they're not getting much in lead generation. So that might be confusing. And I know we're going to cover that in a second.
Yeah, and I might go further. A lot of times they the confuse having a what I'll call a suspect, somebody who fits into their target niche, which is another point of conversation we'll have. They confuse having somebody in their target niche with having somebody who truly has raised their hand, and that's a very different thing. What we want to do is we want to, in almost all cases, put some kind of offer in front of them. Wait until they have raised their hand. In other words, they've said, yes, I'm interested in learning more about this. And now they're a prospect because they've shown interest in the subject. And then once they've shown interest in the subject, all of our time and effort really should be going into people who have shown good interest in the subject, not just, they're a doctor who live in my area and I target doctors. So I think that they're a prospect.
Yeah, it's very different. It's understanding the difference between people that have shown interest or not. And then what we also find is that there's very little work done once people have shown interest. They treat them the same as a suspect, as you mentioned. Somebody that has come to my webinar and listened to me talk, and then there's very, very little work done properly on getting those people to set appointments. Maybe they hand them their business card, or they show them a slide that says set an appointment if you like. And instead of getting from 50 people coming to a webinar, instead of getting 25 appointments, they're getting 3 or 4. And for some of you listening, you might have done webinars and gotten 5% or 10% appointments, and it really should be a huge number from those kind of things.
Yeah, and I think there's a misunderstanding too. For instance, when when the pandemic hit, there's a lot of advisors who are doing a pretty good job with live event marketing, and then they just went flat and they didn't know how to adapt. That's something that we did a really good job with our clients. Is most of them were up 10, 20, even 30% during that year, because we showed them how to adapt and how to adapt quickly to the new world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, that's number one is really get a good lead follow-up system, and generally a good sales system in general, where you have the A to Z of how you're going to follow up with a new prospect. And by the way, the only way you ever replace yourself in your business is you learn how to delegate to other people within your staff. And if you don't have the system in place, if you haven't scripted it, outlined it, exactly what the different processes are, you can never hand off to somebody. I this is kind of an aside, but I find generally financial advisors are just horrible at delegating. And the reason they're horrible at delegating is they never really organized their own processes. They kind of flew by the seat of their pants. And what you've got to do is not be in the fly by the seat of your pants mode. You've got to be in the mode of you have a specific process for how you're doing everything. Tom had a point in here. He said he used to work for Fisher Investments.
Fisher.
Fisher. We were talking about Fisher. I'd love to see if his analysis or if his feedback is the same as mine. What you get in most cases, you get the 3%, 3%, 5% curve within any group of people. So if you have an organization that has 1,000 or 5,000 advisors, you're going to get, if you have 1,000 advisors, you're going to get 30 of them that are super sharp and are making the bulk of the money. The top 20% are going to be having the bulk of the returns. It's the 80-20 rule more normally is the 90-10 or the 3%. What Tom is saying is they're great at direct response marketing. They're great at generating leads, horrible at closing leads if they don't close right away. That was my take on it. I haven't been privy to the internal numbers, but the what he's exactly right is direct. I have maybe I'll dig it up here. I have a great Ken Fisher quote from his book, but he basically said he was worried as he was building the business and scaling the business that all the other financial services companies were going to rip him off because he was having such good results with direct response marketing, and he was out looking for funding. And when he met with a bunch of them, he figured out that they all had this blinders on, this mindset that it didn't work and therefore weren't doing anything. As you guys know, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that, it's not just what you said they weren't good at. Part of what they are good at, and part of what we noticed with all these large companies, is they're not good at helping. There's a lot of echo there, and maybe that's somebody I'm muting. But they're not good at helping the advisors close lots of business.
Yeah.
They get the leads to the advisors, but we've never seen a company that's very good at helping them through the rest of these pieces that we're talking to them about. Hey, Mindy, maybe you could mute and see if that helps. Okay. Did that help? Apparently not.
Yeah.
No, we had the same problem yesterday. That's interesting. Well, if it's me, we're out of luck. I don't know what other setup I could do. But again, the compliment, and not to get distracted on that, is they're very good at direct response marketing, generate a flood of leads, and therefore hand off to their advisors a ton of leads. And probably they could double or triple their results if they did a good job on the back end of having automated and systematic follow-up. So, but that was number one. So number one on our list of 5 things you can do for record results is truly systemize your follow-up from prospect, from lead to appointment to first meeting to onboarding a new client. Track your numbers, so always know of how many leads you're generating, how many appointments you're getting. And what we've been pretty good at doing, and correct me if you have a different perspective, either one of you, but for every new qualified prospect, turning about half of them into a face-to-face appointment, turning about half of them into a new client. And, kind of the classic industry line is 10-3-1, 10 referrals, 3 meetings, one sale. I think that misses the point. I mean, it works if what I'm doing is face-to-face, belly-to-belly with my client saying, give me a list of people who might be useful for me. But you can do much better than that if you're running marketing generated at getting people to raise their hand who are naturally interested in what you're doing. And the one aside there too is the classic dinner meetings. I just did a mastermind meeting with the group has a number of financial advisors in it, 3 people who are actually working, I guess 4 people who are working with financial advisors and a room full of financial advisors. And we did a critique of a classic mailing that was like a restaurant meeting, steak dinner type of thing. And the mistake that gets made on that, as an aside, is the lead magnet is get a free steak, rather than it's here's information about your future that you're coming for. And then people are amazed that they get a bunch of what get derisively called plate lickers. They're surprised they get a bunch of people who are coming in for a free dinner and not coming in for, thrilled about the information they're providing. Well, we want the lead, any lead to be is information that's directly applicable to their situation, that's directly applicable to the service that you're offering. And yes, I would agree with Tom that, Fisher is one of the few companies that does good direct response marketing. I'd love to get inside and show them how to convert at a higher level. Having had a big staff myself in the past, I knew that if we gave them tools to prop up even the bottom 80%, we were always better off than just relying on the top 20%. We're all making all the money, and the bottom half we're flushing out quickly. So let's go to number 2. Number 2 is niche market, to find a target audience that you want to focus on, and stop trying to be all things to all people. I did a great podcast. We'll probably release it in January. But the whole premise of the conversation was the direction the industry is moving in the next 5 years is specialization. Is if you're a generalist and you're not an expert for a small niche, you're going to get run over by AI, and you're going to get run over by the robo-advisor and all this other stuff. Is the world isn't going to need generalists, and the world is going to need specialists. And each niche, you can stand out from the crowd of being the expert for small business owners going through a liquidity event. You can stand out by being an expert in the construction business aimed at contractors, et cetera. But you're not going to stand out by, my clients or anybody who's over 50 in a 5-mile radius of my office.
Yeah.
Mindy, what would you add to that? Or Greg, what would you add to that?
Well, I would add that should make perfect sense if we explain it. See if I can do that without echoing so much. But that should make perfect sense if we explain it. That if you're doing something like I want to work with people. Steve, why don't you mute? See if that while I'm talking, that'll do it. But yeah, that's very echoey.
Yeah, give me a second.
But yeah, if you want to work with people that are going to be over 50 in a 5-mile, a 5-mile radius or 20-mile radius, you're really not saying who you are, or you're not speaking anything to anybody. I mean, that's like just saying that you're a financial advisor, that you like to work with people on their retirement. I mean, I don't know how that gives any message to anybody. We're hearing that over and over again. We look at LinkedIn after LinkedIn. We're looking at website after website, and everybody looks the same. You said it really well. They look the same. JCPenney suit behind an oak desk. Everybody looks exactly the same. If you are, let's say, working with pick a market, dentists that own their own practice. And that's the niche that you want to work with. Now, people that are dentists that own their own practice can hear about you, and you can help them with their financial needs. Then they would pay attention to you. They were going to pay attention because you might have some information that's very specific to them. Now, I'm going to listen to you instead of the guy that I'm talking to right now that is this generalist. In what you say about it's not just specialization for specialization's sake. It's because now you're talking to the person because you're about talking their language and their needs and what might be different about them. And everybody thinks they're special. I mean, in a sense they are, but they want to be treated like they're special and like they're somebody that has their specific needs in mind. And let's face it, most of you guys want to work with people that are on the higher income level range because then they have less clients and more value per client. And that would be a niche that you can then identify and target. So that probably makes psychological sense for you. And now we're seeing if Stephen can get off mute. His internet looks a little bit slow, but I can keep going on that while he's doing that. And we just constantly have people that also, when we do help them with figuring out the niche, what can you do to do that? Well, there's a lot of things you can do to identify, even if you're, let's say you wanted to work with dentists, like that example I gave, but you're not a dentist. You don't have to be a dentist to figure out what the special needs are for dentists. They've got, it's very easy to investigate. For one thing, talk to a few dentists. And there we go. And then you can write a white paper or a book or have some material on your website that's very specific for those guys.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, here was the quote I was looking for, as I couldn't figure out how to unmute here. When my firm started doing direct mail marketing for high net worth investors, industry experts said we were nuts. Ditto when we started internet direct marketing, wouldn't work. No one would respond to advertising like that and become clients. Next came radio, print, and TV. They all worked, which is part of how we built my firm. But most everybody in the know thought we were daft. When we started doing it in other countries, their pundits said, maybe it'll work in America, but never here. Just examples, whatever you do, if it really works, everyone will think you're crazy until you're a proven success. And I would like to argue with that last sentence is, the rest of the industry still hasn't picked up the lesson of Fisher. As you guys know, I first started behind the scenes in working with in marketing for Northwestern Mutual with one of their top, 1/10 of 1% guys. And I became highly aware of all of their advertising. All their advertising is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. They do nothing to drive new clients to their advisors. Everything they do is purely image advertising or institutional advertising. The advisor I was working with, and the one guy was doing more than probably all the other advisors in the Denver metro area, at least everybody else in his office. And he didn't even know how to check the prospects that were coming in from the website on Northwestern Mutual because it was so few and far between. He really didn't care. So that is a big contrast. But that's a great quote. I like to quote that one. So we have number one is really get a templated sales process in place. So you're good at following up with every new lead, turning them into an appointment. And by the way, it starts with sorting out leads from qualified and unqualified. You figure out who you want to deal with and sort them out on the way through, because the ones that are highly qualified, at least self-reported, you want to spend all your time and effort on those, and you don't want to get bogged down into the ones that aren't qualified. Then the second point that we were making there is the worst thing to ever do in marketing advertising is to say, I want to work with everybody. What you want to do is become an expert in a narrow niche. And with your marketing, you can certainly market to multiple different niches. The advantage of niching is all of your conversation that you're going to have in your videos, podcasts, advertising, social media marketing, direct mail marketing. If you get their language down, it's all going to resonate with them better. It's going to be more likely to have a high level of responsiveness. It's going to much more likely to attract the people you want to attract. That's a big part of the mission. I guess the second part might be figure out a niche that has one that you really enjoy working with, people that you're going to click with. And it doesn't have to be you used to be a policeman and now you deal with cops. You used to be a doctor and now you deal with doctors. You used to be an academic, now you deal with academics. But you do have to learn their language and target people effectively.
Well, and the great thing in this space is that not many people are doing that. Very few people take advantage of that strategy. So if you're the guy in Chicago that works specifically with doctors, you're going to be maybe the only one that they hear about in Chicago that works specifically with doctors. For example, that would be a huge market, and there'd be a lot of doctors in Chicago. There's a bunch of medical schools, so you could do fantastic doing that because not many people are taking advantage of that. They're just another one of the 5,000 financial advisors in Chicago.
Yeah, and the third thing I would say, and we won't spend much time on this, I know that some of the advisors that we're having on this webinar, either now or later, are going to be captive. They don't have much flexibility on what they can charge, what they can do in one thing or another. But something we haven't talked about a lot in some of our other conversations and I was having this this conversation with a couple of 1% advisors recently. One of the ways, if you have a niche that's a upscale niche where you really want to focus on being the advisor, is part of it is you've got to, and I talk a lot about that in my book. And by the way, everybody on the webinar, reach out to Mindy and we'll be happy to give you a free copy of my book, both digitally and physically. I was going to share it with you here in the webinar, and I think Demio didn't want to upload a 350-page book PDF as it seemed to be giving it a nervous breakdown. But we will share that with you. Mindy, you might put the link to go register, get the free book while we're talking about. Best way to do it is just get in contact with her, and she'll give you all three of my books actually. But you're never wanting to be the guru at the bottom of the mountain. Think about how the metaphor is: people seek out the guru at the top of the mountain. One of the mistakes I think people make is being too accessible and giving too much free advice. And the conversation I was having down in Florida was, if I want to be the top person for doctors, well, I would craft here's a $5,000 package, and we will do a comprehensive review of your needs and so forth, and maybe a portion of it gets applied to your first year of us managing your funds if we decide to move forward. But I see a lot of advisors hesitant to do that, or they massively underprice. We'll do $500 and we'll do all of your initial planning. Well, I would rather it be, if I'm going to, and I don't want to target people who are broke anyway, but if I'm going to be the expert with doctors who are neurosurgeons, let's say, I'm going to have here's the complete evaluation of financial health for neurosurgeons or for MDs. And it's a $5,000 package. We'll go through everything. If you decide to move forward with us as a client, great. If you don't, that's fine too. If you decide to move forward, maybe you can have apply portion of it to their first year fees if you want. I'd prefer not to even do that. I'd prefer to be, here's the $5,000 or $10,000 package. It's going to do a deep dive on where your finances are. And the way you position yourself as an expert is you act like an expert, right? I wouldn't want to have a complex legal problem and expect I'm going to go to $1,000 an hour attorney and they're going to invest 10 hours up front before they decide they're going to take the case. I would expect that I'm giving them a retainer of $10,000 up front to get going. And I think financial advisors should put themselves in that same category. Any thoughts or expansion on that? It's a really good way to position yourself as the expert, assuming you're doing a good job on your targeting.
Yeah, now some of them are captive. The guys that are captive in a company may not feel like they can do that if you're not an independent advisor. And so, don't get distracted by the fact that we're giving that advice.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I see them being fearful, right? And the way you get over being fearful is you position yourself well, you create a great sales process, and then we come to number 4, which is going to be filling your pipeline. But if you have a big pipeline of prospects, it's easy not to be fearful, it's easy to be choosy, and it's easy to position yourself well. But what you've got to do is you've got to do all those things before you open that floodgate, or else once you open that floodgate, you're going to mess up the rest of it. So that's what I would say is number 3 is be the guru. Position yourself as inaccessible, position yourself as the expert, position yourself as being highly in demand. I see people who will share with me their calendar, and hell, every slot of every day of every of the next 3 weeks is open. I'd much rather it be my first appointment is available next Friday at 10:30 a.m. or the following Tuesday, and you have a full calendar. And even if you're not really that full, it's very important. And by the way, Tom has asked a question here. Any and everybody, feel free to jump in here and ask any and all questions that you have. Feel free to just put it in. I'll try to remember to look at it. And
yeah, we appreciate you, Tom, for putting comments in.
Yeah, and by the way, I agree. The the statement is, I feel like this is a world where we've been in where our advice as an advisor is highly commoditized. Well, that's right. Is the worst place to be is to be viewed as a commodity, and the best place to be is to be to be in a competition, be the only one. A great book. I don't think I have it behind me here. Blue Ocean Strategy, and the whole idea of Blue Ocean Strategy is become a category of one and not be the same as everybody else. One of the authors I loved years ago was Tom Peters, and he said it this way: most people are running their business and their marketing sounds like we're no worse than anybody else. I would say almost all financial advisors, that's exactly the thing. Is, I've got my CFP or my CHFC or my, whatever the hell the other 90 different designations are, and I'm no worse than anybody else. Well, the base level that somebody should expect of you as an advisor. It was Theodore Levitt from Harvard, a great marketing expert, and he talked about, he did it like a target, where the center was the expected product, the next layer was the expanded product, and then potential product. And it's a good way also to think about it is you want to be the perfect fit for a narrow slice of people where you're very specialized and perceived to be the guru, the expert in that. And I agree totally with Tom is the industry has wittingly or unwittingly turned every individual into a commodity and interchangeable. And if you're a commodity, you're going to be run out of business by AI, right? It's also why, as we've been joking behind the scenes, 95% of everybody who ends up in the industry washes out within the first 2 years. One is they're not fed a consistent lead flow of quality prospects. Two is they don't position themselves as being anything other than no worse than anybody else. And three, if you're going to be new in the industry, it's very hard. Nobody tells you to, but you're not going to be specialized, and you're not going to be the guru in any particular niche. That's why, as an aside, we don't want to get down this rabbit hole too far. Having something like what the Kennedy Group calls a shock and awe package, having your own book, being an author, being a podcast host, but definitely having your own book that you physically deliver to prospects. And as we were talking about yesterday, it's so easy now to have 20 of them. If you want to specialize in medical, you could have the book on the 10 things that every RN needs to know to secure their financial future, the book that every anesthesiologist needs to know, the thing that every neurosurgeon needs to know, and everyone could be very tightly targeted and speak in the language of what that is going through. And yeah, Tom, you said you're guilty of reducing financial planning fees with good prospects. Well, what you don't want to do is get into the position of negotiating. In fact, it sets you up on the wrong foot on the way in the door. If you look at the bell curve, I would much rather be the most expensive person they interact with. There's another great book. You can tell I read a lot, but the book Influence, Science, and Practice by Robert Cialdini. The great quote out of that is, absent other objective criteria, price determines perception of value. And really, it doesn't matter that you're CFP, 100,000 advisors are CFPs, or 90,000, or whatever their current number is, or whatever the other designation is. What they're going to see, just like choosing a lawyer. I mean, if I go into a lawyer, I say, I have this complicated tax problem, and they say, okay, great, no problem, we'll handle it for $50 an hour. I'm going to wonder whether they're really capable of handling this or not. But if they quote me $997 an hour or $1,250 an hour, I'm immediately going to go to, this must be the best person in the niche on this. Now, there is a point at which you can price yourself out of the market, but most people do the opposite. What they do is they start negotiating on price, and therefore they position themselves as desperate, not the leading expert in the field, and then they start competing on price. And you can't compete on price because you're ultimately competing with zero, right? You're competing with people who can do it on their own. AI is going to take over I truly believe there's going to be a flushing of about 50% of advisors the next 5 years, because why wouldn't AI take over the bottom 50%? It'll do as good a job as the run-of-the-mill guy who's no different from anybody else.
Well, when you say about the lawyer example, I think it's important to mention that what some people are thinking about is they think about, well, the other advisors are charging X and the other advisors are charging Y, and they try to place themselves in the middle, and that's like the stupidest pricing strategy you could ever have. If you were going to price yourself the cheapest, that sort of makes some logic, because at least, I mean, if somebody were pricing on value, or on I'm sorry, on who's going to pay the least, that makes sense. It's a stupid plan, but that would make sense. If you were the most expensive, it's going to be you must be the best, right? I mean, that would make some sense. But the middle makes no sense at all. It has no pricing logic whatsoever. But yet we have people all the time that want to do that. They think that makes sense. I don't want to be the most expensive. That's you either want to be the most expensive or you'd want to be the cheapest. Those would be the only two pricing strategies that would make sense. And we're advising everybody to be the most expensive. And as you and I would always say, we want to be double the most expensive, or the next price person, because I want to be perceived as twice as good.
Yeah. Well, and it maybe to when I did my MBA, they talk about the bell curve and A tail, B tail, and A tail is Bic pens and B tail is Mont Blanc or Waterman or something like that, or whatever is more expensive than a Waterman. I'm not that much into pens. I ended up with these Watermans because they'll survive being in my pocket all day. People keep giving me Mont Blancs and then they fall apart within about 3 weeks. The little top comes unscrewed. I've lost them out of my pockets so many times. I'll never have another one at this point. Don corrected me because the true pen aficionados, whatever the right way to say that is, like when he was in Italy, they all had their little pin case and carry them around in a little leather case. Well, if I have to baby it, I don't want it.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say on that A tail, B tail is, it's very tough to make money at being the cheapest of anything, but it's impossible as a financial advisor. There's going to be if you're going to do a good job, you're going to do a certain amount of labor and so forth. And I know, I mean, before anybody gets, tries to correct me, there are certainly companies where they're selling life insurance policies to everybody, and they're working the trailer parks, and they can be the cheapest and work on volume, but that's a hard way to make a living. What I'd much rather do is have a well-defined niche, be upscale, and be the most expensive, but the one who's most specialized and who's the guru, the expert in a very narrow niche, right? So that's our next point, is to make sure that you don't fall victim to that. Let's go to our last point for today, because we're going to hit time on the clock here. But it's opened the floodgate of prospects. And, at one end of the spectrum, it seems like financial advisors think that the only way they can get clients is referrals. And then what they do is they pester their clients for who do you know? And then they think that 10-3-1 formula is the only way to go. And on the other end, there's, again, I'll quote Dan Kennedy, there's the marketing inset. Somebody was asking what the book. Blue Ocean. Yeah. It's Blue Ocean Theory, or the Blue Ocean. What was the full title? Yeah.
It's by Roger Wayne.
Yeah.
Blue Ocean Strategy.
I would say I would recommend you read my book first. But the book I mentioned is Blue Ocean Strategy by W. Chan Kim.
Yeah, W. Chan Kim.
Yeah, How to Create Uncontested Market Space and Make the Competition Irrelevant. Great subtitle, by the way. And read my book first. So read Extraordinary Marketing for Financial Advisors. We'll even gift you a copy. But
right, I mean, that one. Our your book is going to be very specific to everybody here.
Yeah, and there is a full chapter. I don't call it that, but there is a specific chapter on Be the Guru, make yourself a category of one. But let's go to the next point of open the floodgates of prospects. And where I was going with that was Kennedy's quote is marketing incest, and most industries suffer from marketing incest. And, we have worked across multiple industries. Mindy, you've worked with authors across all different types of subjects in the Christian community, the Christian youth market, running big conventions and training sessions and so forth. And Greg, you've worked across multiples in, being both a rocket engineer to a psychologist and everything in between. But what I will say is almost all industries suffer from it, but I have never seen one that's worse than financial advisors. Perhaps CPAs are as bad about this, but they suffer from is marketing incest. You think about, I'm a financial advisor, and I look around at what everybody else is doing, and most of them discount Fisher, strangely enough, and they look around at what everybody else is doing, or they get inside of Northwestern Mutual or Mass Mutual or some other big RIA, and they look around at what everybody else is doing and just do the same thing. And the first mistake in any industry, certainly the industry that I came out of, which was strangely running martial arts schools, but when you look at what everybody else is doing and do what they're doing, is the problem is you're looking at the 90% that aren't doing particularly well, and you're missing out on the 3% that are kicking ass, right? So one mistake is to look at what everybody else is doing and make the false assumption that that's the success strategy. And in fact, Earl Nightingale's quote was, if you go into a business and don't have a good business strategy, a good success strategy, look at what everybody else is doing and do the opposite. And I think that's a really good way of saying it. But most advisors end up in really a narrow mindset of they can do like steak dinner, lure them in with the filet mignon and then pitch them on retirement planning. Those work. It's the lure that gets missed is wrong. Getting people in a live meeting, whether it be at a community college venue, in a library, in a high-end restaurant or whatever, if you get them in the door with the right logic, it works if you do a really good job of converting to appointment. And Greg, one of the things we saw, big, very successful advisors still doing a horrible job at, here's the example, doing a webinar or a dinner meeting, getting people to raise their hand and register, doing a horrible job converting them to live participants. But then if they didn't convert them to live participant, doing nothing at all about converting them to an appointment and then to a client until they showed up at a live meeting, right?
Well, and I think, even worse was, what is, I know the example you're thinking of, is at the registration for the live meeting, they had their address and their information and all the possible things you could need to set an appointment prior to the live meeting. So
yeah,
it was even completely out of their mindset that they registered them up to a month in advance, and they could have called them and had a couple good reasons for them to set their meeting with them prior to the webinar. But instead, they had about a 40% show rate, and so 60% of the people that very likely could have done something before, they lost 100% of that 60%.
Yeah.
And then so it was not just that, but then at the live meeting, they didn't do a very good job of setting appointments.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, on that book talk, definitely read my book first, but then read Influence, Science, and Practice if you haven't read that book. That should be required reading for anybody who's in any level of persuasion. You should read that, and it's the best marketing and sales book probably written from a standpoint of human influence and persuasion. But so moving on, that open the floodgate is, we know there's all kinds of ways to generate high quality prospects. The first thing to do is determine who it is you want. And then there are strategies that are working great for financial advisors on LinkedIn. The problem with LinkedIn for financial advisors is all of them are there, right? So if there's one place where you want to go where you're not fighting your competition, that's probably the worst environment where you're, fighting your competition. The good thing is, once you have niched tightly, is it gives you a good breakdown of, if I want to go get business owners or C-suite executives in the tech industry or something like that, I can target them. And by the way, you can get a great list of those people without it being marketing and LinkedIn. What I think that advisors make the mistake in LinkedIn is trying to do everything organic and not just buying advertising. We get a little bit higher cost per lead than other social media, but a higher quality of prospect by just going and buying advertising rather than trying to do it organically. But you can do cold outreach strategies, cold email strategies. You can do posting and getting visibility on LinkedIn, which is probably the least productive. And then you can just go buy targeted advertising at the people you want, target them very closely. Same thing is working. Facebook is working really well, especially if your niche target and audience will go get a quality list of MDs or something like that, target them, but then we can target them by profession within there, by targeting group membership and pages they've liked and so forth. But the thing that people miss a lot is direct mail. And people keep talking about it being old school and being snail mail, and in fact, the company that we're working with, Greg, you and I hadn't talked about this, Brian of Profit 911, now rebranding themselves as Jurassic Marketing. We were, he's calling it Jurassic Marketing because people think of direct mail as dinosaur age at this point. But direct mail works better than ever, and it works great for cold prospecting, works even better for once you've got a warm lead, follow up on warm leads. And people who haven't done direct mail before, that's usually where we start. I was talking to an advisor recently, and they said, well, we're niche marketing to doctors, but doctors want to work with a financial advisor who's not a doctor. Now let's analyze our comment. What was happening is they were generating a lot of lead flow, doing a horrible job converting them to appointments. Well, if I'm doing a horrible job converting them to appointments, I don't mind read and say I'm not converting them to appointments because I'm not a doctor. What I do is say, what is it going to take for me to do a good job of converting them to appointment? And, the first question was, how are you following up? Are you doing sequential follow-up with them? Oh, yeah, we're sending them email. Well, how often are you sending them email? Once a month. Yeah, it was once a month. Yeah. Okay, are you physically mailing to them? No. Are you okay? So you're not doing sequential direct mail to them? No. Are you sending them a big package of your qualifications, branded towards doctors and why you're great? No. Well, you can, you go through the list and all of a sudden you figure out, well, of course you're not converting a high percentage to appointment. Well, we know targeted quality prospects, we should be able to convert half of them to an appointment, right? Once they've raised their hand. So if I can convert half of them to an appointment, then we have to have that follow-up system. But the way you develop the lead flow, that's why we ended up with that painting back there. I saw that advertised. I'm a big fan of Leroy Neiman. I've got a number of other of his prints, but I saw this one. Of course, everybody will immediately recognize it probably as a facade of Wall Street, of the New York Stock Exchange with Thomas Jefferson. I don't think that New York has managed to get rid of that Thomas Jefferson statue yet. Hopefully that one's still there. I haven't heard that they took it out. They took Thomas Jefferson out of City Hall. And they took Teddy Roosevelt out of the Museum of Natural History. But I don't think they've gotten rid of that Thomas Jefferson. But the reason we had that statue was because of the Parthenon. Mindy, you have a picture of the Nashville Parthenon there that you put up on the wall. The Nashville Parthenon, if you don't know, is an exact replica of the actual Parthenon without all of the destruction from age. It's how it looked originally. But the way to develop a flood of traffic is to have 5, 10, and 20 different things going on every month that's driving traffic. So if you want to create traffic from referrals, you've got to create an extremely aggressive client communication strategy where you're communicating with your clients regularly, staying in front of them. By regularly, I really mean every day by email, at least once a month or twice a month by direct mail, maybe a newsletter and some other touches every month, where you're hosting live events, whether it's online or in person, for your clients. But the way to generate referrals in line is constant client communication, pass along tools that you share with your client education on what your capabilities are and the wide range of things that you can do with your clients. And so you pass along tools, books that you create and give to your clients. One advisor I was working with did so many referrals by creating a book. And basically what they did is they gave every client 5 copies of their book and had for their clients to share. They started creating a new book every quarter. And so they had now we're talking little books, not big books, but a new little book every quarter on specific topics. And every time they created a new book, every client got 5 copies. If they had a meeting with them that month, they gave it to them physically. If they didn't, they mailed it to them with a cover letter. If I want to make sure you got this, the advisor could give them a signed copy of the book, and here's 5 for your friends for you to pass along. Well, pass along tools, reports, books, events that they can invite their friends to, webinars, Zoom meeting, meeting in your conference room, dinner meeting, whatever it would be. But you got to have referral systems where you make it easy for your client to invite their friends and plug their friends into it. That should be one pillar, is 4 or 5 different things that you're doing to generate referrals. Another pillar is you should have an effective social media marketing campaign. And that can certainly be LinkedIn. There's, we know, I think now 7 different things you can do on LinkedIn that works pretty well, but 7 different strategies on LinkedIn, but also Facebook works well if you're doing good narrow niche marketing on Facebook. You should have a direct mail strategy. You should have we could go through this list forever, but we want to have 20 different things that we're doing every month, so we have a bunch of different feeders. Mindy, Greg, what would you add to that?
Yeah, and each of those has some small tweaks that I think what happens is we end up with this. Sometimes people say, "Well, yeah, I tried that, but it didn't work." All these things work like gangbusters, but most of the time there's just some missing pieces to it that are left out. And that's what's great about your book. I mean, and we're giving it to you guys for free, so make sure you get with Mindy and get it, so that you can see those missing pieces. Like on the webinar deal, it's a big, massive difference. I mean the difference between getting 2 new clients or 1 new client to getting 15 or 20 new clients. And that's not an exaggeration. There's no BS on that at all. So we really can make a big difference in the effectiveness of each of those. And that's for like every one of those events.
Yeah.
Every one of those activities.
Yeah. And we'll have to wrap it up pretty quickly, but Mindy, what would you add to this? You've been kind of quiet there. What would you add to this conversation so far?
I think is that all of this is in the book. Just we want to make sure that everybody on the call the copy of the book today.
Yeah. Okay.
That would be a key thing to add.
Yeah, to kind of summarize some of the points that we've talked about, is one point is be the guru, specialize and niche, and then be exclusive, create that category of one. I think of it as being the guru at the top of the mountain. Don't be the guru at the bottom of the mountain, or the blue ocean strategy paradigm for it. But you want to become a category of one and not try to compete with other people because you're the same as everybody else, but be specialized, be niched, be the expert in your field. Another element we talked about was one way to do that is, of course, be exclusive and charge a higher fee, and don't negotiate price, certainly, but it's better to be more expensive than everybody else. Now, what we didn't talk about, Greg, was the fact that if you do your marketing right, prospective clients don't shop. They don't talk to other advisors. They don't figure out, they decide. I always feel like they decide first whether they like you or don't like you. Then they decide whether you are truly an expert at what you're doing. And then they decide if they want to work with you or not, right? I mean, that's the order. They don't say, this person is this amount, this person is this amount, I'm going to go with cheapest. And frankly, if you get prospects that do that, you're fishing in the wrong pond. Your marketing is to the wrong people. You haven't specialized, you haven't niched, and you haven't made your case persuasively, right?
Well,
So-
I would just add on it's not just money, but also if they're looking at your qualifications or the letters behind your name, you're not doing that right either.
No. Yeah, that doesn't get you very far. Back to that expected product, they expect you to be competent. And certainly there are incompetent advisors, but they expect you to be competent. Competent doesn't get you very far, right? That's the base level of expectation, right? If you're incompetent, go find something you can be competent in, because you should get out of the business altogether. But if you're competent, that doesn't get you very far, right? Telling people about your educational background and your certifications, all that stuff, that really doesn't get you very far. What gets you far is specialization and being the person for what they are and having the best message to match to what they are as possible. We started with, make sure you have a sales system in place that's organized, that is going to be bulletproof when you stress test it, when you flood it with traffic. Get that in place first. Specialize in your niche, charge a fee up front to really solidify your position, and make sure that you're never negotiating on price, that you're at the high end of the market, perhaps the most expensive in what they do, not at the low end of the market. Then make sure that you have 20 things going on at each given time. Greg, you made a really good point. On every one of these things, we have advisors who say, oh no, that won't work. And in almost all cases, it's as soon as we go through the checklist of here's 10 things to do to make it work, they didn't do those 10 things, right? And the example we were using a minute ago is the reason for doing a live event or doing a webinar isn't so much to get them to show up, it's to get the registration. Once I have the registration that they raise their hand, in the last big live events that I was running, we had half of them signed up as clients before the actual event happened. I mean, that should be the way it goes. I mean, if you're promoting it with any lead time, you should be able to get them through your whole process before the actual event happened, and then the live event is an afterthought, right? What most people do is think they have to come in and eat their steak dinner, and then they're going to make the appointment. And if we don't have an appointment with them before they get to the event, we're going to make the appointment on the way in the door, not on the way out the door. And so there's so many places where people lose the process. But you've got to build the Parthenon. You've got to have 5 or 6 things going on all the time that are generating referrals. You've got to have 5 or 6 things going on that are generating Google traffic, social media traffic, etc. You've got to be effectively using other media, direct mail, and so forth. I was talking to an advisor. This was down in Florida, and they were using a little neighborhood magazine and trying to brainstorm how to get the little neighborhood. You know the conversation, Greg, is there's this full color magazine that goes to my neighborhood, and I signed a 3-year contract. How can I get this to work? And I annoyed everybody else in the room. I said, you're not going to get it to work. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good the ad is. That's the wrong venue for you. And everybody else was brainstorming on what to do with the ad. I said, no, just ask, can it go away? Don't do it at all. And finally, I said, well, okay, if you're not going to get out of it, just buy the back cover and then do an ad on the back cover. If that doesn't work, nothing's going to work. But, so many advisors just don't have the first starting point of what's the right media, what's the right message, who am I targeting, what am I targeting with them, and then how do I open the floodgates to get people in the door. It's a really interesting conundrum. On that note, I mean, we've gone about as usual, about 15 minutes over our scheduled time allotment. I apologize for my early technical problems and ongoing. We never did solve the where the echo was. I think when I was muted, it was still there, and when Mindy was muted, it was still there. You know.
No, when you muted, it was gone. So I think we.
Oh, was that it?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Yep. See, if I'm talking now, it's okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep.
I don't know. Mindy's number is 303-808-8719. The link to just schedule an appointment is here. Our website is Advisor Wealth Mastery. Thank you for everybody who attended live, and for everybody will be much larger number to see the replay. Thank you, and we love to talk to you, and we'll gift you a free copy of the book.
Yeah. Looking forward to talking.
Yeah, thank you. And guys, you want to meet in our other meeting room?
Yeah.
For a second?
That'd be great.